I'm super excited to be here and show you the indie perspective on web games. Some of the things will align with the publisher perspective and with the platform perspective. And what I want to tell you is that this is my own experience. And so my name is Andrzej, you can call me Ender. Beside being a game developer and founder of Enclave Games, where we have a huge team of me and my wife, and we are making games. I'm also a creator of the JS13K Games competition. I'm fostering the community, the Game Dev JS community. We have some meetups, workshops, hackathons, and such. I'm also sending the Game Dev JS weekly newsletter. I'm also a Mozilla Tech speaker. So thank you to W3C for inviting me, and thanks to Mozilla for sending me here. And I'm also excited about cutting-edge tech in which you can make games. Currently, it's WebXR and progressive web apps. I want to start the presentation getting back to 2011. There was one Wayback Machine to 15 years ago. This one is a little bit shorter. So there was a W3C workshop in 2011 in Warsaw, which sparked really cool conversations, which made me prepare a presentation for a conference in 2012. And at the conference, during the presentation, I was considering if it's possible to create HTML5 games with the current tech. And it was a struggle. I mean, it was really hard to create something. You could potentially do it, but it was really, really challenging. The performance was not the best, to say the least. Most of the games that we were creating back in the days were without audio because it was easier to say it just don't work instead of trying to fight with all the features, with all the problems and bugs. Working offline was only in theory. In practice, it didn't work too well. There were many APIs which were just drafts. And they were so cutting edge that they were usually not working at all. But it was really cool to experiment with the Gamepad API, play the games with the Gamepad, have an FPS with the pointer lock and full screen APIs working. But it was still experimental, and it was really hard to build products with that technology. It was also hard because there weren't many tools that you could use. I remember the first games I was building, I was using jQuery, not the game frameworks, but tools I already knew because many front-end developers were interested about the games and started using those tools that they already knew. And basically, monetization was non-existent. It was a really a topic that, well, basically we were building games for fun and seeing if it's technically possible. Not many developers were thinking about having a business around that. The good news are most of the stuff works in 2019. It's easy enough to create games. You don't even have to be a programmer to create games. And most of the technical challenges were fixed in the process. So right now, building games, at least those small hyper-casuals, it's not about struggling with the technology, but rather, okay, so it's easy. I will spend a week building a game, and what next? So basically, the main question asked right now in 2019 is, okay, so I've built a game. It wasn't a problem. Everything worked. What now? We still have discussions of comparing web to native. And you can choose native. Even though you are building games with open web technologies, you can package them and publish them in iOS, Android, or Steam, or wherever. The problem is you are competing with native developers using native tools. They have way more years of experience, so it's really, really hard. And you're forgetting about the most important features of the web, like sharing the game via the URL. So instead of going native, you can stay with the web and work with publishers and platforms and create games directly for the platforms or work with the publishers who will then send the games to the platforms. Development focus on the mobile web right now. Most of the traffic seems to be going from the mobile devices. And many developers are finding the progressive web apps features really interesting for their games and for implementing that in the game so the game can work offline, we can load some assets after the initial load, etc., etc. And so you can also distinct single developers or very small studios of 2 or 3 people who are working on very small games versus some bigger studios. Small indies usually create hyper-casual experiences, games which you can build in a week or 2, which you can play sitting on a toilet or commuting to work. While bigger studios try to push the boundaries of technologies further, which was the domain of the small indies a few years ago. The cool thing is, indie devs also are looking into the new technologies and trying to build something. Since it's easy to build hyper-casuals, maybe it will be also easy to build something else with this technology. For example, if it's possible to create hyper-casuals in WebXR, is there a monetization? Is there a way to monetize something like that? Where do you publish that? How do you show the games to the public, etc., etc.? These are things I see in the community, but I also decided to ask the community specifically and see what they have to say. They have the feedback and what are their struggles. And it was interesting to see that we don't have a specific big issues anymore. It's rather a whole lot of small things that we have to consider. From things like, we have too many packagers. Should I package my game with Grunt or Gulp or maybe a Webpack or maybe something else? Like, there are too many things to choose from. We need some tools to help us debug the games. Ideally, it would be nice to debug an object on the canvas with inside the DevTools or something like that. We need more materials. There are a lot of information on the web. There are tutorials, video tutorials, and all the materials about all the different technologies, but we need more. There is also a situation in which new platforms are oversaturating pretty quickly, because since you can build games really quick and you can build a lot of games, developers are starting to have a problem of not having the support from the platform or from the publisher, in a situation that, okay, a new platform appears, they are reaching to the indie devs to send the games to the platform, but at some point, when there are so many games submitted, it's really, really hard to get feedback. It's really hard to update something. Instead of 1 or 2 days, you are waiting a month for a change or something like that. So it's really something we could actively work on. There were also more technical questions in the survey, like can we have native 2D and 3D math modules? Because instead of adding them ourselves, they could be built into the browsers and it would be just easier. Or what about shared array buffers? Because we had this situation with Meltdown and Spectre. Can we get back to having shared array buffers? Is it possible? Is it safe? But the two most important things that were mentioned, which you already saw on the previous two presentations, is discoverability and monetization. So again, getting back to 2011, I've built a game in 2011, which was promoting a conference for which I get a free ticket. The game was about shooting to the IE6 icons with small hands and feet. I didn't earn any money, so I hope it's not violating any rules or it's not anyway. It was interesting to see that the game was built specifically for the conference. I only published it on my blog. And then after that, it started to appear on different types of articles. There were 30 best HTML5 games to kill your boredom, or 40 addictive web games powered by HTML5, or 35 web games to pull down your lifelessness. And it was interesting that basically, back in those days, there was 50 games total, and all those articles were just copying and pasting different games from the fixed set. And all you had to do is just make a game, and it would appear somewhere, and then someone will copy it, and it will be everywhere. And it just worked. But a few years later, we have a situation in which some developers are claiming that they made 500 games in a few years. And we have hundreds of developers like these, if not thousands of developers. It's super easy to create an HTML5 game compared to a few years ago. Hyper casuals are created in a week. It's easier to, it's easy to steal a source code of the game, but it's also easy to just look at the game and make the same one in just a few days. So I think the problem might be not in, securing the source code is important, but working with publishers and platforms to track down stolen game and having it effectively taken down and not waiting 3 months for that is pretty important. So discoverability is one thing. The second thing is monetization. We had a situation in which usually a few years ago, developers were selling licenses to portals or publishers. So we had a fixed fee for a specific game to be published on a specific portal, which worked nice. But over the years, it evolved into the subscription model. So usually, publishers were paying a small fixed fee every month for being able to publish the game, to monetize the game, etc. But recently, the most popular approach is just revenue share. So basically, not paying any money up front, but offering millions of users and saying, OK, let's split the earnings out of the advertisements, which is not a good approach from the developer point of view because it's really hard to predict. When I had the fixed fee, I knew how many licenses I will sell, how many licenses I can sell for a specific game in a specific period of time. But with revenue share, specifically at the very beginning, a few years ago, it was OK, so we have 10 million of users. But eventually, the game was not visible at all, and it earned $1 per month, which is not a lot if you want to live out of that. That's why developers started to do other things. They were freelancing, creating some games for companies, etc. Because the monetization, like focusing only on the games when the revenue share came up, it is really tricky. And of course, every publisher and every platform will say, here is the success story of the developer X who earns millions of dollars. And this, of course, happens. But many developers, I think most of the developers are struggling to make a living out of making games. So it's really hard to focus only on the games and earn money. I mentioned that protecting the source code and assets, that part is important, but working on having an ordinary clone of your game taken down from the website is also really important. So I think that's also super important from the developer point of view, to be able to fight with such things together. So to summarize, the technology is good enough, especially compared to a few years ago. But there are no big issues we have, I think. But there are a lot of small issues that we can work on. Discoverability is definitely a problem. With so many games, it's really hard to stand out, to be noticed. It's really hard to be visible with your games. And it's harder and harder to have a business around making hyper-casual games or web games in general. If you want to focus only on that and don't worry about finding other opportunities to earn money and then spend the rest of the time on building games. So I think that's the most important things from the indie perspective. That's it. Thank you for listening. And I really hope we will have cool discussions in the next 2 days. And I want to talk with as many of you as possible because it's really awesome to see so many interesting perspectives in one place. So I hope we will have productive 2 days.